Now, we've heard very interesting, very focused speeches from both Alexandre and Angela about the state of their sector of the industry and the desire. I was very pleased to see a very common desire to work together. And yet, Jeff was very keen to have partnership at the center of discussions and at the center of this panel discussion. So, Jeff, you've heard your colleagues. My sense is that often locally and regionally, partnership between airports, airlines, ANSPs works pretty well. Not always, pretty well. Globally, that seems to be less the case, or certainly that seems to be your take on things. Would you like to say a bit more about what you think needs to be done?
Yes, thanks, David. First of all, thank you to both Angela and Alexandra for, I think, holding out a hand of partnership and recognizing some of the challenges that we all have. I wanted to have this discussion because partnership is genuinely important. We see that in many of the things that we do. We will see it in the success stories that are presented later on today. But I guess I always get a little bit frustrated on the partnership issue because we always talk about partnership, and yet it can be extraordinarily difficult to collaborate and cooperate together. My experience is that it's no good just talking about it at these conferences or signing nice memorandums of understanding. We actually have to break that down into specific work programs where we can get our people working together and we can have a common set of deliverables. And I get frustrated that sometimes we don't do that. And I see the problem, the challenge, if you like, broken down into several respects. One is what are we doing at national, regional, and the global level on the things that we all know and love. And one of the things that again I find incredible sometimes is the lack of the national aviation strategies that Alexandra was talking about. It's incredible to me that in the same state, the airlines, the air navigation service provider, and the airports all use different planning assumptions for their investments. And then we wonder why we struggle to reconcile the requirements and the capacity and so on. And so that's an extreme view. But there's a lot more that we can do at the national level together, I think, but also at the regional level. And for air traffic management in particular, the regional approach is very important because air traffic doesn't stop at the national borders, so there's more that we can do in that sense. And we do a lot of good work. We do air traffic flow management projects, airport CDM, and so on. So there are some really good examples. But my sense is that we have not got a systematic approach to all of those things that really embed partnership and collaboration in everything that we all do. And I personally believe there's a role for the associations to do more there. And we work quite effectively on global issues like standards and those sorts of things. The other side of this coin, though, I think, is that we are all in the aviation industry, and we have a collective responsibility for the stewardship, as Angela was saying, of the industry. At a time when we are under incredible threat now from the environmental and eco-sensitive parts of our community. Angela was talking about noise, but the environmental debate is building up. Everything we've delivered as an aviation industry on the environmental side and the commitments on CORSIA are being challenged even more right now. There are threats of taxation. So we all have to continue to work very well together to protect and nurture our aviation industry and continue with the license to grow, I think. We're doing great work through ATAG, the Air Transport Action Group. I think personally we can do a lot more together with organizations like ICAO and some of the environment organizations. So again, that's an area where I think I guess to summarize my comments, we need to step up our collaborative game at national, regional and global level and protect our overall industry aspects.
Jeff, before I pass to your colleagues, particularly at the global level, could you give me some kind of example of the practical areas where you think global joint action between the three parties sitting here could be a really beneficial thing?
Sure. A difficult question. I mean, I think we're already doing good work on the environment, noise. We will have to step up our game there and do more, I believe. Angela mentioned a number of issues that she sees from the airport's point of view, and I think with data becoming ever more important, I think there's a lot more that we can be doing together to even ensure common vocabulary is one of the things you were saying, Angela. But actually, you know, how is the aviation industry going to handle data? And I think there's a management issue there. There's a technology issue. There's a vocabulary issue. But also, it's going to affect fundamental business models in some parts of the aviation chain, and therefore it's going to affect the relationship between airports, airlines, and air navigation service providers. And the other one, I think, is the one that we all talk about here in the CANSO community, the impact of the technologies that are being implemented and deployed right now. Do we actually have a common view on that, and do we have a clear sense of priorities between us on where the future investments should be?
Okay, thank you. Alexandre de Juniac, how would you react to Jeff's, I think, slight level of frustration about how things are operated at this global level?
I think that Jeff is right. We are talking about cooperation everywhere in any international event or whatever, and there are a lot of talks and not so many concrete realizations. I agree with that. Nevertheless, we have started some collaborative approach, common program, work programs, and I agree with him to say that we should implement all this collaboration in concrete action plans. And we are doing that with ACI. We are doing that with ANSPs. Just one remark,
please.
What is interesting in the national airspace strategy approach is that we convince governments, not only ANSPs, but governments, that having a national airspace strategy is important. For some states who are represented, or some countries who are represented in this room, it is natural. But I can tell you that it is an exception. It is an exception for a government or a country, a state, to have a national airspace strategy. It is perhaps our fault because we have not been convincing, we have not convinced enough the politicians of the importance of aviation. Perhaps it's our fault. Huh? It's also a kind of, how could I say, neglecting attitude, about aviation. Aviation is nice. You visit the factories, or you show the aircraft manufacturer, you visit the airport. But having a strategic vision about the contribution that aviation brings to a country, that is something that is very remote for any politician, and I've been working with many of them, and frankly, I've always been surprised by the lack of involvement, knowledge, engagement in that. There are some states which are very engaged and they have understood that. Just to mention the Gulf state, a part of their success has been built on aviation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But when you see on the other hand in Europe, the timing, the length to implement CESAR, c'est unending.
Right. I have some sympathy. Having run Eurocontrol for 5 years, I have some sympathy with that point of view.
If I could phrase it differently.
No.
We have no borders on land, thanks to EU and Schengen, and we have borders on the sky. It's complètement cinglé.
So your national airspace... Go on. Feel free, ladies and gentlemen. Feel free. Your national airspace strategy, which you're developing with not just in Europe, but in Europe in particular, how do you ensure that you don't run into the risk of the national airspaces being a series of patchworks which optimize their performance rather than the network?
It's a legitimate remark. And we tried, when we built the national airspace strategy with each government NSPs, of local authorities, to tell them you build that to be integrated into the European framework. And we have presented that from the beginning as a way to reinvigorate the single European sky. Because we failed in doing so from the top, we try to do that from the bottom.
Okay, top and bottom. There's some room in the middle as well, I think. But we can come back. Angela, can I come to you? And a question in two parts with the microphone. So first of all, some general reactions to what Jeff and Alexandra have been saying. I mean, do you see this big lack at the global level? And once you've answered that question, and take us the time you want, you also were talking about digital information in particular, and perhaps you could say where you think the global stage could play a role in that particular development.
Well, I think in terms of the first part of the question, Jeff's frustration. I mean, I think he's right. It's just it's a difficult thing to do because each component has its own priorities, let alone the priorities around the world. So the trick is to get a common priority, and everyone has to have something in their top three, let's say, to work on. And I think we have done that. Probably not enough, but I think the Air Transport Action Group example is really the best one. To remind everybody, back in around 2006, aviation had a real target on its back, like it's happening again. And the industry got together and developed a framework and targets and a level of commitment to reduce its carbon footprint, to announce it was doing it, to announce that it was taking the problem very seriously and wanted to be part of the solution. What's happened since is, not so much the industries, not because of what we've done, but what has happened in the rest of the world, so that the issue has gotten worse. We are probably further away. The world, is probably further away from its need to reduce the carbon footprint than it started. And so the clarion call has gotten louder, and aviation once again is on the hot seat. So we have kind of two directions to take. Two main approaches to take. One, to tell our story, because we do have a good story, but also to deepen our ambition and to try to go further. We have to try to figure out how, but to see what we at global, national, local levels can do to further reduce our carbon footprint and to tell the world we are doing it, so we don't get into this flying is a bad thing to do because it hurts the environment. We have to be friends with the environment, but also tell our story. On the digital side, which is not unrelated, because I think we can use technology to improve our operations, both in terms of environment as well as in terms of efficiency and customer service. Just things like using data to provide a better service, to understand our customers better, whether it's the passenger, the airline, the ANSP, the traffic around the airport, what the ground handlers need to know, what government authorities can do to help facilitate the process. Digital identity, things that we're working on with others in the industry, can help us meet the demand, make for a better system, a system that works better for everyone and is cheaper for everyone. So although a lot of technology is going to disrupt us, it will also, if we use it right, will also help us produce a better product and a better service.
Who's best placed to lead that effort on digitalization? Who owns the data? Who's going to share the data?
I think that's part of what is going to change and that we have to be flexible about, because in some cases there's no owner. In some cases the owner comes from outside of aviation, and that's something we're going to have to get used to, that the solutions are not among us. They're from someplace else. And we have to become more flexible and resilient about how we think about using things and using tools. That something that's not an aviation tool can really help us do a better job.
Mm. So, Jeff, digitalization, and then I want to come back to the environmental story, because I think it's the story du jour, if you like. But digitalization, what do you think about this sharing data idea? What can you do globally that would make a difference and add value?
I wish I knew the answer to that, David, because I don't think there is an answer today, because I don't think that we have a sufficiently coherent overview of what is happening with all of these data issues in aviation. And I think in order to advise or recommend what needs to happen, I think you need to get that understanding. I guess that's one of the reasons why I raise it as an issue, because I do not see any focus of attention on it. I think we're all doing our own things. There are external technology providers and others doing their own things as well. And I firmly believe there is scope for at least getting a common understanding between the different sectors of aviation on the impact of technology and digitization, what that's going to do, and how we might react and actually embrace it and take advantage of it, rather than becoming victims of it. And I think that's my real concern, is that at the end of the day, we need to have some enlightened self-interest in this to make sure that we always use the expression, be in control of your own destiny. Absolutely. Well, I don't believe that in this sort of environment you can be in control, but I'd like to think that we're not allowing ourselves to get out of control.
But that's part of the promise of this next project, this new experience in travel and technology that IATA and ACI are working on, looking at that whole journey, the passenger journey, the baggage journey, the cargo journey, and the aircraft journey on the ground, using technology to help on that. And everything doesn't have to be done on the airport the way it's being done now. So trying to reimagine some of that process, kind of take ourselves out of the tradition. So, what do we really have to do, and where do we really have to do it, and bringing government in on that, because a lot of things you do to facilitate the whole process can be brought to a halt by the various stopping places that we have managed to insert into the process, the security process, the immigration and customs, particularly immigration process, and there's great scope for change and improvement in using technology. Right now, it's being done in isolated airports, isolated governments,
Yeah.
And then that needs to be, think of these as pilots, and we need to gather the best practices and try to start encouraging more governments, more airports, more airlines to use the learnings that we have garnered from these pilots.
Yeah. Alexandre, can I come back to you? Angela raised the issue of ATAG and how it had been at least a common effort across all the sectors. I mean, how successful do you think it has been? I mean, I look back on when it was launched, and then it was a time of, people were characterizing aviation as a bit like the tobacco industry. It was a bad thing to do. And then as soon as the economies went south, everybody said, actually, we need all the growth that aviation can bring us, and it kind of went away. So I don't know whether it was circumstances that made ATAG look like a success, or where ATAG actually was a success. What do you think?
We think that ATAG is a success. So it's a good collaboration between all the stakeholders in this industry. It has produced some key programs, recommendation, action plans. It is working now a lot, and specifically on environment. It has heavily contributed to the success of Corsia, what ATAG has done. So ATAG is, from my point of view, is a success. The limit of that, and it's the limit of what we are doing in aviation, that we talk to each other. So we congratulate each other. So you have been very good in environment and in technology.
Yes.
but we do not talk outside the aviation circle. Believe me. When I talk, and in my job, as my two colleagues, I turn all around the world, and I try to talk to other people, other government officials who are not in aviation, or other NGOs, or influencers, or decision makers. And to take the only example of environment, nobody, when I say nobody, it's nobody, zero, is aware of what we are doing in environment. Nobody. So that's the bad news. And we have done something for 10 years, all the commitments we have made, the programs we have implemented, nobody's aware of that. The good news is that we have a good story to tell. The story is good. So when I share the story with these people who are not aware of what we are doing, they change their mind.
Are they persuaded that they may say so?
And I speak, about many people all over the world, outside the aviation circle. So we should look outside these borders.
I think what Angela was saying, not sorry to put words in your mouth, it's a good story, but it may not be a good enough story at the moment, because the demands are intensifying. In France, you have this honte de prendre l'avion. You have this in...
No, for sure. I do not say that the story is perfect.
No.
But it's not too bad. Believe me, people change their mind. And I test that almost every day with all kinds of people who are... that I meet, but who are not in aviation, and they start by, you are a heavy polluter, blah blah blah. We know the story. It's terrible to take an aircraft. You emit I don't know how many kilos of CO2 per kilometer, blah 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 blah. And then I tell them what are the facts and what we are doing. You should tell that. It's very convincing. Guys, we should do better, huh? But already sharing what we are doing. And we need all of you everywhere in this room to push that message is key.
Jeff?
I agree absolutely with both Angela and Alexandra here. I think it's good work has been done on all of the environmental stuff. We're in good shape. We do need to now enhance our work and our arguments on it. But I think that the target audience for that is absolutely outside of the aviation industry, the people that actually do control our destiny in environment departments, finance ministries, and so on. I think my point, though, is that we have that mechanism around, if you like, the economic benefits of aviation and the environmental stuff. We do have the ATAG model that works very effectively. We don't have an equivalent, it doesn't necessarily need to be the same model or something on some of these other key issues, and I think that's my personal view is that we need to be collaborating with that same level of success and intensity that we do on environment and the benefits of aviation in some of these other areas. That might be finding a way forward on digitization or technology. It might even be at a level where we do much more work together on air traffic flow management and national airspace strategies. I just think we need to put some structure behind this very loose words of collaboration, cooperation, partnership amongst us, because I think, as was indicated earlier, everybody automatically reverts their own priorities and their own day job, and collaboration and partnership it gets to be a little bit of an add-on when we have a summit or a conference like this. And we need to get it into our DNA rather than it being a luxury add-on.
Does anybody disagree with that? No. So my question would be, how do you actually do this, Jeff? I mean, you set up a sort of high council of directors general or a murder of directors general, I don't know, and you get together regularly to talk about it. I mean, there needs to be a program of action if this is going to work.
I think that's right. I mean, in previous years there had been a suggestion. In fact, it was from the CANSO Secretary General Alexander Tequila about 10, 12 years ago for an aerospace industry council.
Okay.
And I was in IATA at the time as one of the people that killed that. For the very simple reason that it didn't have the right objectives, and it was going to be just another committee, another piece of bureaucracy overlaying what we had. It didn't have a raison d'etre and a compelling case for change. I think the three associations need to meet more regularly and have discussions on these things. Again, not just discussions about discussions, but to see how we can move forward. And I think, I use an example, maybe we need to take small measures in the first instance. But I don't want this to be a day of my frustrations coming out. But I would say, for example, we've got the ICAO assembly coming up in September or October, and yet we don't have joint industry positions there. We're all submitting our own papers, and it's for me, there's a missed opportunity there for actually having a single industry voice, and we need to do more of that. It's not quite as black and white as that, because we do have some joint papers on different issues. But again, we've never really sat down the three parts of the aviation industry, and we're missing the manufacturers here as well, by the way.
Yep.
But actually sat down and say, what do we need to get out of the ICAO assembly? Now, ICAO is, I don't think there's anybody from ICAO here, it's not the be-all and end-all of everything in the world of aviation, but it is important, and we only get a shot every 3 years at this, and I think we're in danger of missing some opportunities on this assembly, and either encouraging ICAO to take the appropriate action, or maybe on some of this stuff like digitization, we actually want to actually keep them away and allow market forces and other things to have an impact. We just don't have those discussions between us, I feel.
Angela.
Well, interestingly, I think it was last weekend or weekend before last, ICAO had an off-site strategy session, which all three of the organizations, the associations, were invited, and I went. And they are talking about how do they, as regulators, incorporate technology and innovation in their activities, because they can never move as fast as technology shifts and changes. We didn't solve that,
No.
but they recognize that they need to engage industry more. Now, 10, 15 years ago, was industry kind of banging on the ICAO door saying, you ought to engage with us, and now it's almost the other way around, where ICAO, sees that the only way they can stay relevant and valuable is to work with industry, because industry can move at a faster pace than they can. Now, exactly how that is going to work, is partly a political issue as to where regulation stops and technology is allowed to flourish.
They had an idea a while back of a kind of a benefits of aviation campaign, which you would all be invited to subscribe to. That seems to have kind of run into the dust. Is that something which you?
No, it hasn't. They're working on the next edition. It was published in 2017, and there'll be a new one out
for the assembly.
For the assembly,
Okay.
yeah. So no, we've been still working together on that. So that's still going.
Okay, so we're rapidly running out of time. So I'm going to give Alexandre and then Jeff the opportunity to say a final word about what you think you're going to do differently following on from this conversation as you move on to your next role about collaboration. So we do anything differently on collaboration, Alexandre, having had this conversation?
Differently, I don't know if it will be different, but it will be more action-oriented.
Okay, sounds good.
Action-oriented, because less talk, more action.
Jeff, I think you might be quite happy to hear that.
I couldn't agree more, and I think there are some simple mechanisms that we could put in place. For example, ensuring that the regional directors of ACI, IATA, and CANSO actually meet on a regular basis to look at the issues in the states in their region, promote national airspace strategies, do some more regional collaboration as well. you know, I have the luxury of stepping down tomorrow from this role, so I can invent all sorts of commitments and things during the course of today. And Simon
He's
will
looking a
love
bit
me.
worried,
Simon
actually.
will love me
Yes,
forever.
looking a bit
But I do think there's more work to be done at that level, okay. And also embracing some of the external stakeholders, not just ICAO but others. And by the way, in the one answer to your question about the collective noun is that the president of the ICAO Council calls us the chieftains of industry.
The Chieftains.
The Chieftains, there
Chieftains
we go.
was a very popular Scottish band, as I recall, going back far enough. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a fascinating discussion. Perhaps we could thank our colleagues in the normal way. Thank you very much, and thank you all very much. Thank you.